Hi, this is another edition of Stuart Doll Show, starring myself, Stuart Doll. I'm coming to you live from my house right here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Right now, the current temperature is now about 19 degrees at about 1 o'clock. It's about 19 degrees at around 1 o'clock. And like I said, it should get to about 21 today. It looks, pretty sunny out there so far, which is a good thing. Anyways, so let's just get right into my show. Now, on the first, this is a very special edition of my show because I'm going to be, most of my show I'm going to be talking about a few anniversaries that have happened recently. One was the 70th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The first atomic bomb was dropped by the Americans on August 6, 1945. And then 3 days later, on August 9th, 1945. And by doing so, basically they were going to have the United States were trying to plan an invasion of Japan. But the thing is the Americans thought, by planning an actual invasion of Japan, that would just cost millions, thousands upon thousands of casualties, and the blood of these Americans trying to invade Japan, because the Japanese would not make it easy. So by resorting to the most terrible weapon on earth, the atomic bomb, the Americans' sole aim was to get the Japanese to surrender. So they dropped the first one on August 6, 1945. Then U.S. President Harry S. Truman, who was hastily sworn in after Franklin D. Roosevelt died of a heart attack. If you guys don't know who Franklin D. Roosevelt was, he was the U.S. president during most of World War II and up until his death. That's why Harry S. Truman was hastily sworn in. Well, like I said, they dropped the first one on Hiroshima August 6th, and then Truman was waiting for a reply from the Japanese government, and he basically said, "Hey, listen, we've already dropped the one atomic bomb. If we have a second one, we will drop it. If you do not comply with the Potsdam Declaration of unconditional surrender, we will drop a second bomb. And if you do not surrender, we will drop another one." And he made very clear on that threat, because Truman was waiting and waiting. He heard no reply from the Japanese government, because the Japanese government were being a bunch of stubborn buttholes in that, and they were thinking, the Japanese lived by the Bushido Code, which basically they would stand and die and not eat, and attempt not to yield an inch of ground, and they would die for the emperor. They lived by that, the Bushido Code, which basically they would rather die than surrender. And in some cases they got that choice. And in the early part of the years of the war in Pacific, what kind of started it was the event with the Japanese surprise air attack on Pearl Harbor. The thing is the Americans were completely unaware this was going to happen, but they knew they knew tensions were running high between the American and Japanese governments, Yeah, because the Americans imposed an oil embargo on Japan because Japan, and on Japan and that, and basically it was either Japan, halt all military operations and give up territory, or they go and seize territory and that. And the whole aim of the Japanese Army, Navy, and Air Force, they wanted to seize territories that have sources of like raw material like rubber and oil and that, to contribute to the Japanese war effort. And by the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor without any declaration of war whatsoever, I believe they had awoken the sleeping giant of the United States Pacific Fleet. And the sole aim of the Japanese doing this, is they want to cripple the entire fleet. That included the aircraft carriers. But here's one problem: the 3 aircraft carriers that were at Pearl Harbor and that were out at sea at the time. So Isoroku Yamamoto's plan really didn't work well. It kind of worked out, like he crippled, like basically the Japanese Air Force, crippled most of the Pacific Fleet, minus the 3 aircraft carriers and that. And the Japanese Air Force, like they had a chance to, bring a decisive knockout blow to the United States Pacific Fleet than that. At the attack on with the attack on Pearl Harbor, if the Japanese were gonna, do that, they should have, destroyed, some of the the oil dumps and the gasoline dumps and stuff like that. That would be vital to the United States war effort. But and then, like I said, ever since that, then like I said, and then I think it was about 24 hours later, Japanese start conquering territories Malay, the Philippines, the Solomon, the Marshall Islands, basically any islands that would be of sources of like I say, raw material, oil, and that. And the sole aim of capturing this territory and that were under the control of the British Empire and the United States, and that the sole aim of doing this was they wanted to establish an inner defensive ring around the Japanese home island and that by capturing these islands. And everything was going according to plan in the early years of the war. And then by the later years of the war, 1943, and that, the Japanese started suffering defeat after defeat after defeat, and the Japanese were so desperate, they resorted to using probably the most terrible weapon, probably the second most terrible weapon on earth, the kamikaze. And for you people that don't know what kamikazes are, basically they were, basically raw recruits and that of the Japanese Air Force and that, and any volunteers basically that they could spare. And basically, when the kamikazes, when they were using Zero fighters and K-bomb, any old outdated aircraft that weren't in use, basically instead of usually under a Japanese air, like a Zero for example, there would be a long-range field tank. But in place of that, they basically placed a 500-pound bomb underneath where the long-range field tank would be. So that gave extra weight for the Zeros that were basically unfit to dogfight. So some other Zero fighters would have to fly escorts for these kamikazes and shoot down any Americans that would come in sight. And that's the sole aim purpose of using the kamikaze missions were to inflict as much casualties and bloodshed upon the United States. and they did succeed on doing it. The kamikazes exceeded in killing thousands and upon thousands of people in the later years in the war. And then and like I was saying, Victory on Japan Day, or better known as VEJ Day, is the day in which Japan surrendered in World War II, effectively ending the war. The term applies to both the intentional announcement of Japan's surrender was made to the afternoon of August 15th, 1945 in Japan. But because of the time zone differences to August 14th, 1945, when it was announced in the United States, the rest of the Americas and the Eastern Pacific Islands, as well as to September 2nd, 1945, when the signing of the surrender document occurred, officially ending World War II. August 15th is the official VEJ Day for the UK, while the official US commemoration is on September 2nd. The name VJ Day has been selected by the Allies after they named VE Day for the victory in Europe. On September 2nd, 1945, a formal surrender ceremony was performed in Tokyo Bay, Japan, aboard the battleship USS Missouri in Japan. August 15th is usually known as the Memorial Day of the end of the war, the official name for the day. However, this is the day of mourning for the war dead and praying for peace. And this was the official name was adopted in 1982 by an ordinance issued by the Japanese government. Like Japan, conquered territory after territory after territory, and here are some of the most brutal and bloody battles in the Pacific occurred in places like Iwo Jima and Okinawa, which are literally within a skip and a hop of the Japanese home islands. And those in the battles of Okinawa and Iwo Jima were probably some of the most bloody and fierce battles in the world in the Pacific. The Americans basically wanted to invade Japan by amphibious landings and stuff like that. But the thing is that would have cost thousands upon thousands of lives, and just countless bloodshed among American troops. And so the Americans they had to think about another plan. How are we going to defeat Japan and pound them into submission? Well, they tested a nuclear bomb in the New Mexico desert, and it succeeded. So they used the two names of the two atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan were Little Boy and Fat Man. The Little Boy nuclear bomb was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and 3 days later, the Fat Man atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, August 9, 1945, thus ending the Second World War, and with the Soviet declaration of war on Japan, thus breaking the 1941 neutrality pact that existed between the Soviet Union and Japan. And at the end of World War II, after the war in Europe was over, Joseph Stalin, the then Soviet dictator, said that the Soviet Union would join the war against Japan within 90 days of the German surrender. and they exactly did that. They joined the war against the Soviet Union. Joined the war against Japan within 90 days of the Germany's surrender. So basically, like Japan really had no choice in the matter. They had to surrender. Like the Americans first dropped the one on Hiroshima, and Harry S. Truman gave the Japanese government, a chance to surrender. He said, if you listen here, if you do not surrender, we have a second bomb ready. We will drop it, and if you do not surrender, we will drop a third one. And the Americans would have just done that, but I think the two atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki really knocked some sense into the Japanese government back then. Even though Japan, it was ruled by Emperor Hirohito, power within Japan lied within the hardline government, military government, and the hardline government headed by Prime Minister Hideki Chojo, who in 1946 was executed for war crimes. So that's one commemoration. And another commemoration is Russians right now are commemorating the 70th anniversary, the end of the most brutal, the single largest and bloodiest battle in the history of warfare. The Battle of Stalingrad, because it was basically because of the heavy losses inflicted on the German Wehrmacht made it arguably the most strategically decisive battle of the whole war, and it was a turning point in the European theater of World War II. And Germany, after the Battle of Stalingrad, never regained the initiative in the East. And by then, basically by 1945, the Germany was like Hitler and Nazi Germany were literally getting squeezed on two fronts. First, there was the Western Allies were coming in from the west, were coming from the west over the River Rhine, and then the Allies coming in through the south, through Italy, and then the Soviet Red Army closing in from the east. So literally, it was trying to literally squeeze Hitler's nards, because he was literally getting squeezed on two fronts. It really goes to show you that, like I said, the Battle of Stalingrad is considered as the single largest, most bloodiest battle in the history of warfare because of the enormous losses inflicted by the Soviet Red Army on the German Wehrmacht. And for me, as a German citizen, because of my German heritage, the Battle of Stalingrad literally brings chills down my spine. It literally makes me cry at times. I've watched videos and that about the Battle of Stalingrad, and it makes me want to cry because I go oh my god, I honestly can't imagine this immense suffering that the German Sixth Army suffered. It was practically wiped out, minus 91,000 troops, plus their commander, Friedrich Paulus, that surrendered to the Soviet Red Army. And on February 2nd, 1943, which ended the Battle of Stalingrad. And the Battle of Stalingrad lasted from August 23rd, 1942 to February 2nd, 1943. So, and I think what he really started how the Soviet Red Army started squeezing the noose around Stalingrad, around the Sixth Army, and that was on November 19th, 1942. The Red Army launched Operation Uranus, a two-pronged attack targeting the weaker Romanian and Hungarian forces protecting the Sixth Army's flanks. The Axis forces on the flanks were overrun, and the Sixth Army was cut off and surrounded in the Stalingrad area. Adolf Hitler ordered that the army stay in Stalingrad and made no attempt to break out. Instead, attempts were made to resupply the army by air and to break the encirclement from the outside. Heavy fighting continued for another 2 months. By the beginning of February 1943, the Axis forces in Stalingrad were exhausted their ammunition and food, and the remaining elements of the Sixth Army surrendered. The battle, the Stalingrad, like I said, it lasted 5 months, 1 week, and 3 days. And like I said, the Germany do not do themselves any favor whatsoever by bombing the city of Stalingrad, because all the Germans did was they turned the city of Stalingrad into rubble, and that gave perfect cover to the Soviet snipers and troops because what I mean by perfect cover, it gave perfect cover to the Soviet snipers and troops and that. Basically, troops could hide behind something. They could just pull the pin on a fragmentation gun, and then there'd be body parts of German soldiers flying all over the place, and then the blood of the German soldiers is spilled in the snow, turning the snow blood red. I honestly cannot imagine the suffering that the German Sixth Army suffered. And that what was I gonna say? Yeah, like I said, the Luftwaffe, the fourth, I guess you could say the fourth corps of the, I guess you could say the Luftwaffe, were trying to do 900 individual sorties against Soviet positions, and basically the whole sole aim purpose of the Luftwaffe, by bombing Stalingrad, they would think, oh, the Soviet Red Army would surrender. No, they didn't, because by the Luftwaffe bombing the city of Stalingrad, that became a mass grave for most troops of the German Sixth Army. So Wilfred von Richthofen's 4th Luftwaffe Corps did not do Germany any favor by bombing the city of Stalingrad. That's, like I said, thus turning Stalingrad into a mass grave for most troops of the German Sixth Army. Minus the remaining elements that surrendered to them. And like I said, after 3 months of a slow advance, the Germans did finally reach the riverbanks, capturing 90% of the ruined city and splitting the remaining Soviet forces into 2 narrow pockets. Ice flows on the Volga, now preventing boats and tugs from supplying the Soviet defenders. Nevertheless, the fighting, especially along the slopes of Mamayak Kurgan and inside the factory area in the northern part of the city, continued. And some Soviet counteroffensives, recognizing that the Germans were ill prepared for offensive operations during the winter of 1942, and most of them were redeployed elsewhere on the southern sector of the Eastern Front. The Stavka decided to conduct a number of offensive operations between November 19, 1942 and February 2nd, 1943. These operations opened the winter campaign of 1942 to 1943, November 19th, 1942 to March 3rd, 1943, which involved some 15 armies operating on several fronts. And like I said, you like the weak, and this is on another subject on the Battle of Stalingrad. The weaknesses on the German flanks. During the siege, the German and Allied Italian, Hungarian, and Romanian armies protecting Army Group B's flanks are pressed their headquarters for support. The Hungarian Second Army was given the task of defending a 200-kilometer section of the front north of Stalingrad between the Italian army and the Voronezh. This resulted in a very thin line, with some of the sectors where 1 to 2 kilometers stretching were being defended by a single platoon. These forces were lacking effective anti-tank weapons. Because of the total focus on the city, the Axis forces had neglected for months to consolidate their positions along the natural defensive line of the Don River. The Soviet forces allowed to retain bridgeheads on the right bank, from which offensive operations could be quickly launched. These bridgeheads, in retrospect, presented a serious threat to Army Group B, and that. So, like, you know, and like I said, there was about like I said, like, like, I honestly don't know what Adolf Hitler was really thinking, about, double-crossing his supposed ally Joseph Stalin. And I say supposedly because, like I said, June 22nd, 1941, Adolf Hitler double-crossed Joseph Stalin, and he launched the long-awaited invasion of the Soviet Union. So, yeah. So for you people that may be on YouTube, that may be, Germans like me, like, you could understand what I'm you can sympathize with me. Like, the Battle of Stalingrad brings chills down the spine of every single German. Doesn't matter if they're living in living in Germany. Like, the only reason why I have German citizenship is because of my German heritage. And like I said, the Battle of Stalingrad, like, it brings a chill down my, like, an absolute chill down my spine because of the immense suffering that the German Sixth Army went through. And that, like, it just, it's really hard to believe. And that, and so then, like I was saying, and then what also ended the war in Europe was the surrender signing on May the 2nd, 1945. And this was conducted at General Dwight Eisenhower's headquarters. General Dwight Eisenhower was the supreme Allied commander in World War II. And, like, there was I can't remember there was one person, to sign on behalf of the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union. And the thing is, I think it was Ivan Suvorov who was signing on behalf of the Soviet Union, and that basically Stalin counterminded that and said, that Suvorov, didn't have any prior authorization to sign on behalf of the Soviet Union. So because of that, the whole surrender ceremony thing was done again. This time in Berlin on May the 8th, 1945, thus ending the war in Europe. So, like, World War II ended up being, like, the most bloody war in, like, history, because, like, there was, like, millions upon millions of people who were either killed or left homeless in that, and then peace was not fully restored to Eastern and Central Europe for, like, another 40 years. So, I hope you guys do like this special edition of my show, The Stuart Dahl Show, where I was talking about, World War II, like in the Pacific and in Europe and that. I hope this was a very interesting show for you about VEJ victory over Japan Day, and about the 70th anniversary of the Battle of Stalingrad and the 70th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that. But for now, this has been another edition of my show, the Stuart Dahl Show, for you young people stay in school, stay out of trouble, and you will do perfectly fine. So for now, I'll be the same. Peace, bye-bye, and stay cool, my friends.